Let's jump to Paige Bueckers and the UConn Huskies. I know we have some UConn subscribers here because every time we put out a video on this channel talking about them, we get a lot of chatter. And I was very, very impressed, if I'm being honest. Even though some of what happened was predictable, they did not by any means win this game in a blowout in the round of 32. I think you would have to say the depth is still an issue. A lot of the things we expected to be problems were, and they beat Syracuse 72-64. But as much as it might feel bad, and I'm more than happy if you have thoughts on some of these other players, it is very hard for me to focus anywhere but Paige, Jackie, because she was phenomenal. 32, 10, and 6. Shot better than 50% from the field, 4 steals and a block, just piling up these turnovers down the stretch of this season, having to take on more of a load on defense and breaking this zone. It just felt clinical by the end of this game, and I think evident of, even though they're thinned out and there's some freshmen involved that maybe aren't typically, they're well coached. Aaliyah Edwards and Paige Bueckers know what they are doing, and they were able to just generate these corner threes and rim attempts at will, despite, I think, a very solid game by Syracuse. What did you think of how this all came together? And what is it, a 31 Sweet 16s for UConn now? I mean, maybe we shouldn't have been surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I've covered this UConn team on and off during this, I guess I'll call it their injury streak or injury stricken era. I mean, it's some UConn historian will attach a name to the past few years where essentially all the depth that Gino Auriemma and Chris Daly put on paper just has fallen apart in the past few years. And we talk about, is this controllable? Is it not? Why is this happening? But amid all of that, Gino and CD find a way. And I think this is sort of what we saw unfold against Syracuse. Before I talk about Paige, I do want to mention Ashlyn Shade and KK Arnold, who you alluded to before. They made these very clutch and needed open threes in the corner pockets. Those 2 freshmen have essentially been starters all year long. And there were questions about how those 2 in particular were going to handle the high pressure, high stress situation of an NCAA tournament run. And they looked pretty poised. So sure, this is a team defined by the inside-outside scoring and facilitating attack of Paige Bueckers and Aaliyah Edwards. But those 2 guards, in KK Arnold and Ashlyn Shade, are going to be really critical if the Huskies want to make it to a Final Four. But Paige. So you and I were talking about Paige before we got on air. And I said to you, this reminded me of that run in 2022, that double overtime win against NC State, where Bueckers was on an absolute other universe. It was the game where Dorka Juhas dramatically broke her wrist. It was a nutty game. And Paige wasn't even 100%. I mean, she was gimping around on that knee, but she was still just absolutely remarkable. 2 years later, she looks like a completely different player. She's a 2-way player now. She's a player who Gino can put on the best scoring threat on the opposition. Those minutes against Dyaisha Fair were really critical. And just seeing how she's so in tune with the length that she has as a defender and those instincts to be a good on-ball defender. This is not the Paige Bueckers we saw 2 years ago. And it's really quite scary just how much better she is defensively. And as you said, I mean, her ability to attack that zone defense for almost, were they playing in zone close to the whole game? It felt like a lot of it.
I would say they were, and when they weren't playing zone, which I can't remember who was on the call. I've seen way too many games with too many broadcasters, but shout out to the color analyst who pointed out that when they were not in zone, it was a very aggressive press. So there was no like normal basic coverage that we know Paige could probably easily dissect. They made it very difficult on this team and made those freshmen make their shots and made Paige work for it and everything else. So yeah, a huge credit to, I think, everybody, but Paige obviously having the ball in her hands the most.
Yeah, I mean, I even give Nika Mule a tiny bit of credit there, although she fouled out. But playing those intense minutes against Dyaisha Fair, I mean, that is no easy assignment. I mean, she is one of the most creative and crafty shot creators probably in the country. So it was impressive. It really was an impressive win. I mean, the UConn team probably from last year might have lost a game like this. So it makes a difference.
It does. And you mentioned foul trouble, obviously fouling out for Mule, but Arnold, I think she was teetering on foul trouble all game. And I think that, speaks to the kind of the difficulty of this game in its own way too, in addition to those freshmen making their shots. But yeah, with Paige, I mean, what stands out to me on both sides of the floor is it would have been easy to worry that as somebody who I think at her peak, even dating back to high school, has derived, the special ingredients that make her from a level of physicality that is rare in basketball, that given that she is going to continue to face stiffer levels of competition, higher levels of athleticism as she continues her career, being tall but not swole necessarily, sure, and also dealing with these injuries, it would have been very easy to worry that element, which is, again, what makes her special, could have diminished. And for her to come out this year, play bigger than her previous position would have indicated, to impact the game as a help defender, as an on-ball defender, get to the free throw line more than ever before, and just, again, look like herself, getting into the post, slithering into the teeth of the defense and finishing, and those kind of dump passes, drop passes that she's so good at. It feels like the dynamic ability we kind of hoped we would see, that, to your point, we did definitely see earlier on, has not gone away despite the difficult couple of years that she obviously has gone through. And so that was very exciting to see. And hopefully, nobody would blame this team for running out of steam at a certain point, given how many minutes everybody is playing, including, Paige and Shade and basically Aaliyah Edwards all playing the entire game. But they've proven a lot already, I think.